chapter body fluid and blood circulation. In this we will know the circulatory system, human circulatory system, then what are the circulatory pathway. So starting with the circulatory pathway, the circulatory pattern are of two types, the open and a closed circulatory system. So the open circulatory system is present in arthropods, mollusks, in which the blood pumped by the heart passes through the large vessel into the open space and the body cavity called the sinus. So annelids and chordates have a closed circulatory system in which the blood pumped by the heart is always circulated through a closed network of the blood vessel. So this pattern is considered to be more advantageous as the flow of fluid can be more precise regularly. All vertebrate possess a muscular chamber heart. So the fishes have two-chambered heart with an atrium and a ventricle. Amphibians and reptiles, except the crocodile, have a three-chambered heart with two arteries and a single ventricle. Whereas the crocodile, bird and mammal possess a four-chambered heart with two arteries and two ventricles. In fishes, the heart pumps out the deoxygenated blood, which is oxygenated by the gills and supplied to all the body parts, from where the deoxygenated blood is returned to the heart, that is single circulation. In amphibians and reptile, the left atrium receives oxygenated blood from the gills, lung, skin, and right atrium gets the deoxygenated blood from the other body part. However, they get mixed up in a single ventricle which pumps out mixed blood in complete double circulation. In birds and mammals, oxygenated and deoxygenated blood received by the left and right atria respectively passes on the ventricles of the same side. So the ventricle pumps it out without any mix-up. That is, two separate circulatory pathways are present in this organism. Hence, these animals have a double circulation. Let us study the human circulatory system. The human circulatory system, also called the blood vascular system, it consists of muscle chamber, heart, a network of close branch blood vessel, and the fluid which is circulated. So the heart, the mesodermal derived organ, is situated in the thoracic cavity in between the two lungs, slightly tightened to the left. It has the size of a clenched fist. It is protected by double wall membranous bag pericardium, enclosing the pericardial fluid. Our heart has a four-chamber, two relative small upper chamber called the atria and two large lower chamber called the ventricle. So a thin muscular wall called in the intraseptum separates the right and the left atria. So whereas a thick wall, the intraventricular septum, separate the left and the right ventricle. The atrium and the ventricle of the same side are separated by a thick fibrous tissue called the atrioventricular septum. However, each of these septa are provided with an opening through which the two chambers of the same side are connected. So the opening between the right atrium and right ventricle is guarded by a form. It is a wall which is formed of the three muscular flaps or cuffs. So the tricuspid wall, whereas a bicuspid or a mitral wall guard the opening between the left atrium and the left ventricle. The opening of the right and left ventricle into the pulmonary artery and the aorta respectively are provided with a semilunar wall. So a semilunar wall in the heart allows the flow of blood only in one direction, from the atria to the ventricle and from the ventricle to the pulmonary artery or the aorta, and these walls prevent any backward flow. The entire heart is made up of the cardiac muscle. The wall of the ventricle are much thicker than that of the atria. So a specialized cardiac musculature called the nodal tissue is also distributed in the heart. So the patch of the tissue is present in the right upper corner of the right atrium called the SA node, that is the sino-arterial node. So another mass of the tissue is seen in the lower left corner of the right atrium, which is close to the atrioventricular septum. It is called atrioventricular node, AV node. So the bundle of nodal fibers, AV bundle, continue from the AVN, which passes through the anteroventricular septum to emerge on the top of the intraventricular septum and immediately divided into right and left bundle. So these branches give rise to minute fibrils throughout the ventricular musculature of the respective side and are called Purkinje fiber. So the node musculate has an ability to generate action potential without any external stimuli. So that is a auto-excitable. However, the number of action potential could be generated in a minute vary at different part of the nodal system. So the SA node can generate a maximum number of action potential, that is 70 to 75 minute square and minute inverse, and is responsible for the initiation and maintenance the rhythmic contraction activity of the heart. Therefore, it is called the pacemaker. A heart normally beats 70 to 75 times in a minute, which is average 72 beat minute inverse. So what is a cardiac cycle and how it affects? How does the heart function? To begin with, all the four chambers of a heart are in a relaxed state. They are in joint diastolic. As the tricuspid and bicuspid wall are open, blood from the pulmonary vein and vena cava flows into the left and the right ventricle respectively through the left and right atria. So the semilunar valve are closed at this stage. So this SA node now generate an active action potential which stimulate both the atria to undergo simultaneous contraction. And the atrial systole, the systoles, the increases the flow of the blood in the ventricle by above 30%. So the action potential is conducted to the ventricular side by the AVN and AV bundle, from where the bundle of the His transmits it through the entire ventricular musculature. So this causes ventricular muscle to contract, the ventricular systole, and the atria undergo relaxation diastole coincident with the ventricular systole. So the ventricular systole increases the ventricular pressure, causing the closure of the tricuspid and bicuspid wall due to atom backflow of the blood in the atria. So as the ventricular pressure increases further, the semilunar wall guarded the pulmonary artery, that is the right side, and the aorta, left side, are forced open, allowing the blood in the ventricle to flow through these vessels into the circulatory pathway. So the ventricle now relax, ventricular diastole, and the ventricular pressure falls, causing closure of semilunar wall, which prevent the backflow of the blood in the ventricle. As the ventricular pressure decline further, the tricuspid and bicuspid wall are pushed open by the pressure in the atria exerted by the blood which was being emptied into them by the vein. So the blood now once again moves freely to the ventricle, and the ventricle and atria are now again in the relaxed joint dystolic state as early. So soon the SAN generate a new action potential. Then the event described above are repeated, and the sequence and the process continue. So these sequential events in the heart, which is cyclically repeated, is called the cardiac cycle, and these cycles go on repeating. So it consists of a systolic and diastolic of both the arteries and ventricles. So as mentioned earlier, the heartbeat 72 times per minute, that is that many cardiac cycle are performed per minute. For this, it could be reduced than the duration of cardiac cycle, which is 0.8 seconds, and during the cardiac cycle each ventricle pumps out approximately 70 ml of blood, which is called the stroke volume. Now I have made a special video on stroke volume, you can visit that. So stroke volume multiplied by the heart ratio, that is the number of beat per minute, give the cardiac output. So therefore the cardiac output can be defined as a volume of blood pumped out by each ventricle per minute, and average 5000 ml or 5 liters in a healthy individual. So the body has an ability to alter the stroke volume as well as the heart rate, and thereby the cardiac output. For example, the cardiac output of an athlete will be much higher than that of an ordinary man. During each cardiac, two prominent sounds are produced, which can be easily heard through the stethoscope. The first one is lub and the second one is dub. So it is associated, the lub one is associated with the closure of the tricuspid and bicuspid wall, whereas the second hard sound dub is associated with the closure of the semilunar wall. So these sounds are clinically diagnosed. It has many factors that affect the cardiac output include heart rate. A higher heart rate increases cardiac output, but an excessively high heart rate can decrease it. The stroke volume, the amount of blood pumped out by each ventricle per minute, that is the stroke volume, and it is affected by preload, afterload, and contractility. If we see the preload, then it is determined by the intrathoracic pressure, atrial contribution, and central venous pressure, and more. After load, the tension the ventricles must develop to pump blood against the resistance in the vascular system. So, contractility, it increases the contractility, improving the stroke volume. Age. As you age, your heart walls get stiff and make it hard for your heart to fill with the blood. So, the blood pressure. The high blood pressure require your heart to pump with more forces, and hormones, adrenaline and non-adrenaline, increases heart rate and cardiac output, while acetylcholine decreases the heart rate. Medications. Anti-hypersensitive drug and beta blockers can reduce heart rate. Exercise. Whether an individual is at rest or exercise can affect cardiac output. Emotion. Stress or excitement can increase the heart rate or cardiac output. So, the cardiac output is the product of stroke volume and heart rate. For an healthy individual, cardiac output is about 5 to 8 liters per minute. Let's know the factors that affect the stroke volume, specifically how preloading, contractility, and afterloading influence it. So, stroke volume is equal to EDV, that is the end diastolic volume, minus end systolic volume. So, preloading is raised due to the fast filling time, more time for the heart to fill, increased venous return, that is more blood coming into the heart. Then it increases the end diastolic volume, and then finally increase the systolic volume. So it lowers due to decrease in thyroid hormone, decrease in calcium ion, and increase and decrease in potassium and sodium. So it lower the blood pressure, hypoxia, abnormal pH, drug like calcium channel blockers. And its effect is decreasing the end diastolic volume, which decreases the systolic volume. Then contractility is raised due to the sympathetic stimulation, epinephrine and norepinephrine, and higher intercellular blood calcium, and even the thyroid hormone and glycagon. And its effect is decrease the end systolic volume and increase the systolic volume. It is lowered due to the parasympathetic stimulation, acetylcholine, hypoxia, and hyperkalemia. And its effect is increasing the end systolic volume, which finally decreases the systolic volume. Then afterloading is raised due to increased vascular resistance in semilunar, and because of that what happens, the semilunar wall is damaged, and effect is increasing the end systolic volume, which further decreases the systolic volume. And is lower due to decreasing the vascular resistance, example vasodilation. The effect is decreasing the end systolic volume, which increases the systolic volume. The important point is preloading increases the filling time. It is increased by the filling time. Effect is that it increases the end diastolic volume, and it increases the stroke volume. Both the preloading and contractility increases the stroke volume, but the effect is that the end diastolic volume is increased in preloading, and in contractility it is decreased, whereas there is a decrease in end systolic volume and contractility, and in afterloading there is increase in end systolic volume and decrease in the stroke volume. Always remember that where there is an increase in the systolic volume, end systolic volume is increased, at that time the stroke volume will always decrease. And even if the stroke volume is decreasing, the stroke volume even if the end systolic volume is decreasing, the stroke volume can increase. Example, in contractility, where the sympathetic system is present, calcium ions are present and hormones are present. At that time there is a decrease seen in the end systolic volume, but the stroke volume is increasing. So cardiac output is an amount of the blood your heart is pumping out every minute, and the important formula in this cardiac output is equal to heart rate into the stroke volume. So the heart rate, how many times your heart beat per minute is the heart rate. There are important keys. For example, the autonomic nervous system is divided into sympathetic nerves, which speed up your heart, and parasympathetic nerve, which slow down it. So the hormone like epinephrine and norepinephrine, they stimulate your heart to be faster, and atrial reflex happens when more blood flow into the artery, stretching the receptor signal to the brain and to increase the heart rate. Then factors that affect the stroke volume, they are we have known the factors in detail, the preloading and contractility and these types, but main thing is the formula for stroke volume, which is end diastolic volume minus end systolic volume. So this effect, what is the effect of it? The stroke volume is controlled by three major things. We know that the preloading, where the stretching of the heart muscle before contraction occurs, there is more venous return or filling time is longer, and it increases the end diastolic volume, which increases the stroke volume. But preloading decreases it if the hormone like thyroid, like calciums are lower, or if the body temperature drops, or if there is hypoxia or acid base imbalance. It reduces the end diastolic volume and lowers the stroke volume. Then in contractility, we have seen how stronger the heart contractility goes up when the sympathetic system is active. Hormone like epinephrine, norepinephrine, thyroid hormone or glycogen are released, or where there is more calcium present, and this decreases the end systolic volume, means more blood is pushed out and higher stroke volume is seen. Contractility goes down due to the parasympathetic stimulus, hypoxia, acetylcholine or higher potassium, that is hyperkalemia, and that increases the end systolic volume and reduces the stroke volume. Now that final one is afterload. This is resistance to the heart but much push against to eject the blood. Afterloading goes up due to higher vascular resistance and damage to the semilunar wall, and it increases the end systolic volume, so stroke volume drops. But if the vascular resistance drop, like in vasodilation, end systolic volume decreases and stroke volume increases. So the cardiac output, your body can either beat faster, push out more blood with each of the beat, that is increasing the systolic volume, and the heart rate is the beat of the heart, and that's how your body meet the oxygen demand of exercise, stress or rest. So that's it, and simple, clear and powerful one. Don't forget about the formula, that is the CO is equal to HR into SV. Now what is this CO and HR? We know that the cardiac output is equal to heart rate into the stroke volume. And what is an cardiac output? Is the total volume of blood the heart pumps every minute. That is the cardiac output. Significance. Then ECG, you're probably familiar with the scene of typical hospital in TV shows where the patient is hooked up to the monitoring machine and showing that the ECG machine beeps at the patient going to a cardiac arrest. This type of machine is electrocardiograph, and it is used to obtain an echocardiogram. So it is a graphical representation of electric activity of a heart during a cardiac cycle. To obtain a standard ECG, as shown in the figure, a patient is connected to the machine with 3 electrical leads. So these continue monitor the heart activity. For a detailed evaluation of heart function, multiple leads are attached to the chest region. Here we will take out only about the standard ECG, where each peak of ECG is identified with a letter of P to T that correspond to the specific electrical activity of the heart. So the P wave represents the electric excitation, that is the depolarization of an arteriole, which lead to the contraction of both the artery. So there is QRL complex, which represent depolarization of the ventricle, which initiates the ventricle contraction. The contraction starts shortly after the Q and mark the beginning of the systoles. So the T wave represent the return of the ventricle from the excited to the normal state, that is repolarization. The end of the T wave marks the end of the systolic, obviously by counting the number of QRS complex that occur in given time period. One can determine the heartbeat rate of an individual. Since the ECG obtained from different individuals have roughly the same shape for a given lead configuration and derivation for the shape indication as possible abnormalities of the disease. Hence, it has some great clinical significance. Now, you can visit a shot of double circulation in which I have mentioned how it occurs in very short form. So, let's know double circulation. The blood flows thickly by a fixed route, that the blood vessel, and the atria and vein. Basically, each atria and vein consists of three layers: an inner lining of squamous endothelium, the tunica intima, and the middle layer of the smooth muscle and elastic fiber, tunica media, and external layer of the fibrous connective tissue, which is collagen fiber. So this tunica externa is present. Now tunica media, tunica intima and tunica externa are present. So tunica media is comparatively thinner in the veins. As mentioned earlier, the blood pumped by the right ventricle enter the pulmonary artery, whereas the left ventricle pump blood in the aorta. So deoxygenated blood pumped into the pulmonary artery is passed onto the lungs, from where the oxygenated blood is carried by the pulmonary vein in the left atrium. So this pathway consists the pulmonary circulation. The oxygenated blood enters the aorta, is carried by a network of arteries, arteriole and capillaries to the tissue. So from where the deoxygenated blood is collected by a system of veins and vena cava and emptied into the right atrium. So it is a systemic circulation. The systemic circulation provides nutrient, O2 and other essential substance to the tissue and takes CO2 and other harmful substance away from the elimination. So unique vascular connection exists between the digestive tract, liver, and it is called the hepatic portal system. The hepatic portal vein carry the blood from the intestine to the liver before it is delivered to the systemic circulation. So a special coronary system of the blood vessel is present in a body exclusively for the circulation of the blood to form the cardiac musculature. So here the regulation of cardiac activity is seen. See the schematic representation of our blood circulation in human body. Now regulation of the cardiac activity. Normal activity of the heart are regulated intrinsically, that is auto-regulated by specialized muscle, nodal tissue. So hence the heart is called myogenic. A special neural center in the medulla oblongata can moderate the cardiac function through the autonomic nervous system. The neural signaling through the sympathetic nerves, that is the part of ANS, can increase the rate of heartbeat and the strength of the ventricular contraction and thereby the cardiac output. So on the other hand, parasympathetic neural signaling, another component, decreases the rate of heartbeat, speed of the conduction of the action potential and thereby the cardiac output. Adrenal medullary hormone can also increase the cardiac output. Thanks for watching. Do like, share and subscribe.